a last-ditch effort by a struggling small Japanese studio. A game that its director was convinced would be his absolute last. That studio was Square, that director was Hironobu Sakaguchi, and that game was their Final Fantasy. The Final Fantasy series came from humble beginnings, as the original's 1987 release was expected to be a commercial failure. But it obviously didn't flop like as expected. In fact, it was quite the opposite. Here we are, 30 years later, with 15 mainline Final Fantasy games, numerous spin-offs, movies, television adaptations, radio dramas, a series of book and manga adaptations, as well as bounds and bounds of merchandise. Over 130 million units sold, $20 million grossed as of January 2017, and last and probably the most important, millions and millions of die-hard fans. Along with its commercial success, the series has been accredited with popularizing RPGs to mainstream fans, along with Dragon Quest, and it's hard to argue against this point. But I was curious about the impact the series has had from a game development aspect over its 30 years. To find out more, I sat down with Kitty Crawford, producer at Blackstaff Games and self-admitted die-hard Final Fantasy fan, to find out the impact the series has had on the industry over the last 30 years from a developer's point of view. Well, how do you feel the Final Fantasy series has impacted the industry as a whole?
It's really tough to say. It's such a massive Goliath of RPG gaming at this stage. Anybody that you talk to that works in that genre or in adventure games has probably played it at some point and has influenced their work. But in the same stretch, like take a game like Doom, which people nickname the godfather of
FPSs.
Yeah, but you know, whilst people may have taken influence from that, or that might have been the reason they got into games or whatever, people aren't going to take, like, they're not going to copy the graphics, they're not going to copy the mechanics, anything like that. It's more an inspiration, I think, at this stage of that level of quality at that stage that games are trying to aspire to.
The series is often accredited with popularizing RPGs with games like Dragon Quest. Do you agree with that, or?
I think in the West, yes. We have our own type of genre of RPGs, which would be, you know, things like Skyrim and Oblivion, where...
Or even like D&D.
Exactly, where you put yourself in the main character's shoes.
Yeah.
To a certain extent, Mass Effect falls into that as well. Whereas, you know, Eastern RPGs like Final Fantasy, you are in control of another character, of somebody who has their own personality, their own destiny, their own goals. And you watch that story as it unfolds, and you don't necessarily portray or project yourself onto that character. And I think that Final Fantasy was the first big title to do that in the West, and led through to other games like Persona or even Nier Automata, which is insane.
How's the Final Fantasy series impacted your work specifically?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm pretty sure that if it wasn't for Final... Well, I probably would have got into games either way, but Final Fantasy VII, which was the first one I ever played, gave me an experience that I didn't really realise I could have. Like, it gave me this entry into this completely different universe and world and story that I could completely immerse myself in and lose, you know, all semblance of reality in it. So that kind of led into a hardcore love of all games in that genre that are good, obviously. And so the games that I like to make, that I prefer to make, are games that follow that structure. So one of our games, Disposable Steve, is really heavily narrative based. Like, it's very light on mechanics and very heavy on the story. And like, out of all the titles that we've made, that's the one that I've enjoyed making the most. And even when I make my own personal projects, they're always very heavy on narrative, because for me, that's the ultimate gaming experience, when you can completely lose yourself in a story like that. I think for me, the only game in the past decade that's done that is Undertale, where I've completely lost myself in the story, and I actually had a feeling of nostalgia playing that game, even though I'd never played it before, because it was so resonant with me, with like the games that I played back whenever I was young.
And finally, what is the fanfare theme?
For Final Fantasy VII, it's da 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 da.
Kitty was close, but no Phoenix Down or Chocobo or some Final Fantasy pun I'm not smart enough to come up with.